I started going to the Velvet Room on Fridays because my best friend Marcus dragged me there one night after a particularly brutal week at work. I was 26, working 60-hour weeks as a junior architect, and my idea of Friday night was microwaved leftovers and falling asleep to documentaries. But Marcus insisted, and honestly, I was too tired to argue. The first time I saw him, I wasn't even planning to go inside. The line wrapped around the block, and I was already calculating how long it would take to get an Uber home when this voice cut through the noise. Deep, warm, with just a hint of gravel. "You two, come on up." He was standing at the velvet rope, clipboard in one hand, and I swear the streetlight hit him like he was starring in some indie film. Tall, broad shoulders, dark skin that seemed to glow under the neon sign, and these eyes that saw right through my exhausted corporate armor. His name tag said, Dominic. Marcus practically sprinted forward, but I hesitated. "Are you sure? We didn't make a reservation or anything." Dominic smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you forget what you were worried about. "I'm sure. Go ahead, enjoy your night." That should have been it. A random act of kindness from a bouncer having a generous moment. But the next Friday, when Marcus convinced me to go back, it happened again. Different crowd, longer line, same result. Dominic's eyes found mine in the sea of people, and he waved us forward without a word. "Dude, how are you doing this?" Marcus whispered as we walked past at least 40 annoyed people. "Did you slip him money or something?" "I've never even spoken to him except to say thank you," I said, which was true. Every time I'd mumble my gratitude, and Dominic would just nod, his expression unreadable, professional. It became our routine. Every Friday for 3 months, Marcus and I would show up, and Dominic would let us skip the line. I started noticing things about him, the way he handled drunk guys with firm but gentle redirection, how he knew regulars by name and asked about their lives, the small silver ring he wore on his right thumb, the way his jaw tightened when someone was rude to the people waiting in line. I'd catch myself looking for him before we even reached the entrance, my heart doing this stupid flutter when I spotted him at his post. Marcus noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "You know he's gay, right?" Marcus said one night while we were inside, shouting over the music. My stomach dropped. "What? How do you know that?" "Theo, I've seen the way he looks at you. Also, my friend Jake hooked up with him like 2 years ago. Said he was a gentleman, if you're curious about the details." I wasn't curious about the details, or maybe I was too curious, which felt worse. I'd been telling myself that Dominic was just good at his job, that he probably let lots of people skip the line, that I was imagining the way his gaze lingered half a second longer than necessary. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but Marcus just laughed and bought us another round. The thing is, I'd only been out for about a year. My family knew, my close friends knew, but I hadn't actually dated anyone. There were apps on my phone I had downloaded and deleted a dozen times. The idea of putting myself out there, of being vulnerable like that, terrified me in ways I couldn't quite articulate. I'd spent so much of my life being the quiet, studious one, the one who followed the rules and met expectations. Accepting that I was gay was one thing. Actually living it was something else entirely. But Dominic made me want to be braver. Week 12, Marcus got food poisoning and bailed on our Friday tradition. I almost stayed home too, but I'd had an absolutely terrible day. A senior partner had torn apart my designs in front of the entire team, and I felt like I was drowning in inadequacy. I needed to be somewhere loud, somewhere I could disappear into the crowd and stop thinking for a few hours. I showed up alone, joining the back of the line like a normal person. It felt strange, standing there without Marcus's constant chatter. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to look occupied, when I heard that voice. "Theo?" I looked up. Dominic had left his post and was walking toward me, eyebrows slightly raised. It was the first time he'd ever said my name, and the sound of it in his mouth did something to my nervous system. "Hey," I managed. "Marcus is sick, so I'm flying solo tonight." "You don't have to wait in line," Dominic said, gesturing toward the entrance. "It's okay, really. I don't want to cause problems." The people around me were already staring, probably wondering who I was to get special treatment. Dominic's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. "Come on, I insist." I followed him to the front, hyper-aware of every eye on us, of how close he was walking beside me. At the entrance, he paused, his hand almost touching my elbow, but not quite. "Rough day?" he asked quietly. The question surprised me so much I answered honestly, "Yeah, actually. How did you know?" "You carry stress in your shoulders. They're up near your ears right now," he demonstrated, hunching slightly, and despite everything, I laughed. "Occupational hazard of architecture," I said. "Everything I design is apparently terrible, so." "I doubt that's true." His voice was soft, almost lost in the bass thumping from inside. "Sometimes people tear others down because they are threatened by their talent." Something in my chest cracked open. Here was this man, this beautiful man who'd been quietly looking out for me for months, and he saw me. Actually saw me. "Why do you let me skip the line every week?" The question tumbled out before I could stop it. I've been trying to figure it out and I don't understand. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. The neon lights painted his face in shades of blue and purple. "You want the honest answer?" "Please." "That first night you looked lost, overwhelmed, and when I called you up, you were so genuinely surprised and grateful, not entitled like most people who get waved through. You thanked me like I'd done something significant." He paused, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. "The second week, I told myself I was just being nice. The third week, I admitted I was looking forward to seeing you. By week 4, I was checking the time every Friday around 9, hoping you'd show up." My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Dominic, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I just thought, maybe if you were interested, we could talk sometime. When I'm not working, no pressure." I thought about all those Fridays, all those moments of wondering and hoping and being too scared to ask. I thought about my terrible day and how his kindness had been the only good thing in it. I thought about how tired I was of being afraid. "I'm interested," I said. "I'm very interested. I'm not very good at this. Any of this." The smile that spread across Dominic's face was worth every anxious moment. "What time do you get off work?" I asked. 2 a.m. We could grab late-night food. There's a diner 2 blocks over that makes incredible pancakes." "I'll wait," I said, and meant it. I did go inside for a while, nursed a beer, watched people dance. But mostly I thought about Dominic outside, doing his job, and how in a few hours we'd be sitting across from each other in a diner booth. The possibility of it felt enormous. At 2:15, I was standing outside the Velvet Room when Dominic emerged in jeans and a hoodie, his work clothes in a backpack. He looked younger somehow, less guarded. "You actually waited," he said, and there was wonder in his voice. I said I would. The diner was exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find at 2 in the morning. Cracked vinyl booths, fluorescent lights, a waitress who looked like she'd seen everything twice. We slid into a corner booth, and Dominic ordered pancakes for both of us without asking, which should have been presumptuous, but somehow wasn't. "So," he said, folding his hands on the table, "tell me about your terrible day." And I did. I told him about the senior partner, about feeling like an imposter, about how I'd spent 5 years in architecture school and sometimes still felt like I didn't belong. He listened with this focused intensity, like my words were the most important thing in the world. "I was pre-med," Dominic said when I finished. "Full scholarship to Columbia. Parents were so proud. I was going to be a surgeon, make 6 figures, buy them a house. What happened? I had a panic attack during my first cadaver lab. Not because of the body, but because I realized I was doing everything for everyone else's expectations. I didn't actually want to be a doctor. I wanted to write." He laughed, but there was old pain in it. "My parents didn't speak to me for 2 years when I dropped out." "Do they talk to you now?" "Sometimes. It's complicated. They're trying, I think. But they still introduce me as their son who's figuring things out, even though I'm 29 and pretty figured out." Our pancakes arrived, and we ate while talking about everything. His writing, which he did in coffee shops before his evening shifts. My sketches, which I admitted I sometimes enjoyed more than actual architectural work. His coming-out story, which involved a boyfriend in college and his mother finding them asleep together. My coming-out story, which involved a carefully prepared speech and my dad just saying, "Okay, is that all? The game's on." "Do you date much?" I asked, trying to sound casual and failing completely. Dominic smiled around a forkful of pancake. Not really. The hours make it hard, and most guys aren't interested in someone who works nights and writes during the day. What about you? You're literally the first person I've been on a date with since coming out, I admitted. Is this a date? I'm calling it a date. It's definitely a date, Dominic confirmed. Best one I've been on in years, actually. We stayed until 4 in the morning, until the sky started lightening and the waitress refilled our coffee for the 5th time with a knowing look. I learned that Dominic was working on a novel about his grandmother's immigration from Haiti, that he was terrified of birds but loved thunderstorms, that he'd noticed me adjusting my glasses every time I was nervous, which was apparently constantly. I should let you get home, Dominic said finally, though neither of us moved to leave. I don't want this to end, I said, and then immediately felt stupid for being so earnest. But Dominic's expression softened. It doesn't have to. I mean, if you want to see me again, maybe when it's not 2 in the morning and we're both slightly delirious from lack of sleep. Tomorrow, I suggested, or today technically, later today. I work tomorrow night. Then before work, coffee? I know you probably have a favorite place. We exchanged numbers, and Dominic insisted on walking me to the subway, even though it was out of his way. At the entrance, he hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. He was warm and solid, and he smelled like cologne and pancake syrup, and I wanted to stay there forever. Thank you for waiting, he said quietly, his breath warm against my ear. Thank you for letting me skip the line, I replied, and felt him laugh. We did get coffee the next day, at a tiny place in Brooklyn where Dominic apparently wrote most mornings. And then we got dinner 2 days after that, and then I started showing up at the Velvet Room on Fridays again, but this time I'd wait until 2 a.m. and we'd go to our diner. Marcus was insufferably smug about the whole thing. I told you he was into you. I'm basically Cupid. You should name your first child after me. 3 months in, Dominic invited me to his apartment for the first time. It was small, a studio in Queens with slanted floors and radiators that clanked, but every surface was covered in books and plants. There were notebooks everywhere, filled with his neat handwriting. It's not much, he said, suddenly self-conscious. It's perfect, I said, meaning it. It's so you. We cooked dinner together, which mostly involved me chopping vegetables while Dominic did the actual cooking. We ate on his couch, plates balanced on our laps, and watched a documentary about ancient architecture that I'd been wanting to see. I need to tell you something, Dominic said during a segment about Roman aqueducts. My stomach dropped. Okay. I'm falling in love with you, he said, not looking at me, his eyes fixed on the television. I know it's only been 3 months, and maybe that's too fast, but I think about you constantly. When I'm writing, when I'm working, when I'm just existing, you're always there. I set my plate down carefully, my hands shaking slightly. Can I tell you something? Please. That first night when you let us skip the line, I thought you were the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. And every Friday after that, I'd spend the whole week looking forward to seeing you for 30 seconds. I convinced myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things because the alternative was too terrifying. What alternative? Dominic asked, finally looking at me. That someone like you could actually see someone like me. That I could have this. I gestured between us. I'm falling in love with you too. I think I have been since week 4. Dominic kissed me then, soft and careful, like I was something precious. And then less careful, his hands in my hair, my hands gripping his shirt. We stayed on that couch until the documentary ended and another one started, just kissing like teenagers, learning the geography of each other. Stay, he whispered against my mouth. Stay tonight. I stayed, and I kept staying, night after night, until my toothbrush was next to his, until half my clothes lived in his closet, until his apartment became our apartment. A year later, I quit my job at the architecture firm and took a position at a smaller company that actually valued my ideas. Dominic finished his novel and started querying agents. We adopted a cat named Frank, who was afraid of everything except Dominic. We fought about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes and had long conversations about what we wanted our future to look like. I stopped going to the Velvet Room on Fridays because Dominic changed jobs, started bartending at a quieter place with better hours. But sometimes, when we walked past it, he'd grab my hand and pull me close. "Remember when you used to wait in line?" he'd say. "Remember when you used to let me skip it?" I'd reply. And we'd both remember that first conversation, that first date, that first moment of being brave enough to want something and ask for it. All because a bouncer decided to let a tired, overwhelmed architect skip the line, week after week, until that architect finally worked up the courage to ask why. People always ask how we met, and Dominic loves telling the story. How he spotted me in a crowd and couldn't look away. How he invented reasons to talk to me, to see me smile, to hear my voice. How I was oblivious for months until I wasn't. But what I love is what he tells me in private, in the quiet moments before sleep. That he'd been looking for me without knowing it. That when I walked into his line of sight that first Friday, something in him recognized something in me. That love isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's a slow reveal, a pattern emerging week by week, a question finally asked and answered. We got married 2 years after that first pancake breakfast in a small ceremony with family and close friends. Marcus was my best man and gave a speech about being Cupid that made everyone laugh and me cry. Dominic's parents came, and his mother hugged me for a long time and whispered, "Thank you for making him happy." On our wedding night, in a hotel room overlooking the city, Dominic pulled me close and said, "I'm so glad you came back that 12th Friday. I was starting to think I'd have to actually say something instead of just letting you skip the line forever." "I'm glad I was brave enough to ask why," I replied. And it's true. That moment of courage, of vulnerability, of asking a simple question changed everything. It gave me this life, this love, this person who sees me completely and chooses me anyway, who lets me skip all the lines that matter and waits for me at the end of every day. Sometimes the best love stories start with a small kindness, a moment of recognition, and the courage to ask, "Why me?" And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the answer is, "Because I've been waiting for you all along."